Brecky, breck. Coax. Coax. It's everyone's favorite boomer and vintage lens enthusiast. And today we're going to look at another vintage 1.2. This is the Canon lens FD 50mm 1.2. I use lens hoods with all these old bad boys. FD is a more modern version of the FL, although for all practical purposes they're almost identical. But let's look at this one real quick. Canon lens FL 55mm 1.2. Okay, you can see the diameter's bigger. It weighs a lot more, but they look like they're almost the same length. So it's got that going for it, except it weighs a lot. This is much more lightweight, and on a small mirrorless camera like the Sony A5000, it's not too bad at all. Not too bad at all. They have the same amount of elements of glass in them, but they have different grouping. What I'm doing now, moving forward, and I went back and I backtracked some, I just put a copy and paste link to like these lens databases. And if you're interested in the technical details of these lenses, then you could just go to these databases and look it up. I'm looking at the practical end of it, of how it handles out in the field. Now, you say, oh, well, 1.2, that's great for low light level. And they are. This one's outstanding, and this one's pretty good too. I'm going to do a separate review about low light level with these things. But if you go out and you buy one, you spend $200, $250, or $300, do you need another 50 or 55mm? And the answer is no. These are extremely well corrected lenses, and only the bonus is you get a 1.2, oh, and a 1.4, and a 2, and a 2.8. Wow. So these lenses are good enough that you just need this lens and nothing else. I recommend using a lens hood with all these old vintage lenses, and they're cheap. These collapsible rubber ones are like $9 or something, and they're highly worth it because they help cut down on flare and increase contrast. And I use these on the photo shoots that I go on. Today with this lens, I went to a town called Motown East, and I shot there. I got there early at 6 o'clock, but since it's the middle of May, the sun was rising around then anyway. And I did take a couple of shots at f1.2. I stopped a couple places and I took a couple of shots. And then I took a couple of shots at f2 and 2.8. Then I went right to 5.6, 8, and 11 for everything else. And you'll see that in the following slideshow. So the build quality is excellent. Outstanding, excellent. This thing looks like it was brand new. Bought this brand new. Wow, look at that. You know, it's got all those aperture blades too. So it makes nice star patterns against bright point lights. So it says 50mm, that's 55mm. Can you see the difference? Yes, you can see the difference a little bit. What does this focus down to? Look at that. 0.5 meters, less than 1.75 feet. What about this one? Well, this is about less than 2 feet or 0.6 meters. So this focus is a little bit closer. And I went through the whole range from close-up, that's the closest focusing. I went to medium range, and then I went to an infinity target. It's my opinion this lens favors infinity target, but I'll work in a pinch at the closest focus distance, especially if you stop it down a lot, which is interesting. I notice on digital cameras, you know, 50mm, you think you get some depth of field, but wow, f4 and a 5.6 is still pretty shallow. And if I wasn't absolutely perpendicular or parallel to my subject, like pointing like this, I could see the effects of the shallow depth of field with this thing. So I got to keep that in mind. And when you're stopping down, you know, they have this thing. They all have this thing where that opens and closes the diaphragm, right? But you know, then if you got everything, the exposure set at 5.6 or 11, and then you open it up, it just blasts out the screen, so it's sort of pointless. And I used a focus magnifier, and you can hit the focus pretty good. And I was trying to use the fastest ISO I could to eliminate shutter, camera, unintentional camera movement, but it's just a couple times where I forgot. I was leaving at ISO 100 and 200. I was shooting at 80th of a second or 60th of a second, and some of the pictures got just a tiny little unintentional camera motion, and I couldn't do like a pixel peep on those. I just did a full frame. So you got to keep that in mind too. Even though it's a fast lens, when you stop down, you still got to remember that, well, f16 is still f16. You either got to boost the ISO or open it up and then adjust your shutter speed accordingly. I use a shutter priority with these cameras, and then that works out pretty good for me. And of course, all these adapters, they have a little bit in focus to make sure that you get infinity. Well, infinity is like really right there, because they want to make sure you got infinity, right? So what happens is you can't use your depth of field scale then. I mean, if infinity's right there, then you got to sort of remember to put it right there. But if you're relying on your depth of field scale, like hyperfocusing distance, well, sometimes it could get dicey. So you got to watch out for that. You just got to watch out for that. Just out of curiosity, but let's pretend that we got it on the Canon camera. And let's look at their depth of field scale on these two bad boys. They only stopped out at f16, so this one gets down to 3 feet. This one gets down to like 3 meters, sorry. This one looks like it gets down to 2.5 meters or something like that. So there's a little bit of difference there. All right, optical quality, they're almost identical. I mean, for daylight, day-to-day shooting, taking snapshots or whatever you want to do. Except this is just slightly bit wide. What else do we have here? So, is there any reason to get this one instead of that one? Well, if you get this one cheaper, get this one, without a doubt. Of course, it's a little heavy. If you put it on a full frame camera or one of those that has an eye level viewfinder, then it's not so bad. But this one's much lighter, definitely. You could look at the, go to that lens database and you can see the difference in weight with these things. I think it's like 100 grams difference or something. Something crazy like that. So you see that this one looks beautiful, brand new. Now it's got some dust on it. Well, you got to expect that. It's the middle of May and there's all sorts of pollen and stuff floating around. This one is older and it's in really great shape, but the enamel's got like some, silver metal showing through the enamel. And this one has the aperture ring is in the front, whereas the more normal to have it in the back. Of course, on a digital camera, it doesn't matter. You know, if you put it on one of these cameras that has like the faux pentaprism on top where the flash is, then there's a possibility the flash could be blocking this data, which you need, which it wouldn't do on that. But they're both nice lenses, and if you want to get a 50mm, go with this. Now, if you get an f2, f2s are a dime a dozen. Well, they used to be a dime a dozen. They seem to be going up in price. I mean, you used to get them for like 30, 40, 50 bucks, 50 bucks in perfect condition. Now it looks like a f2 50mm. They're cracking $100 now. I guess that's just inflation and all that good stuff. So there's a whole bunch of, Canon made a whole bunch of f1.2s. This was the first one, I believe. Then they made one of these in FD. Then they made some 50mm in FD. I think there's 3 different flavors of these. And then you have the infamous or famous L lens, which is thousands of dollars. And I'll tell you what, you don't need that. You spend your $200, $250, or $300 on one of these, and you're good to go. Because you're going to use it as a regular 50mm anyway. You know, stop down these regular f numbers, and but you got your 1.4 and 1.2 when you want to do your low light stuff. Absolutely, and it's super fast. I was in twilight, and I was ISO 800 was too fast. I had to bump it down to like 200. How about that at 1.2? So you know, in twilight, there is a performance boost in your exposures. At night, yeah, sure. Instead of using 5 seconds, you use 1 second with this. So there's always that, you know. But the proof is in the pudding. And why don't we just go look at some pictures right away? It was a bright sunny day. Although the sun was low on the horizon, but I tried to take a mixture of stuff that's in the shade, stuff that's in the sun, stuff that had sun and shade, so I could check everything out and see how good it is. I also did some backlighting, and you'll see all that and what you think, not what I think, but what you think. And as usual, the everyone's favorite boomer did this so you don't have to go out and buy a lens and say I don't like it. Whereas you could just watch a short video, maybe 20 minutes or something, and then you can say, wow, that's a nice lens, I want to get one, or nah, I'll pass on that. There is also a video of a bird. I was walking down the street and there's a bird sitting there and he was chirping or something. Maybe the bird was trying to distract me from its nest or its fledglings or something. So I took like a 30 or 40-second video of this thing squawking. It looked like a grackle to me, but what do I know? I'm not an ornithologist. I don't know anything about birds, which means I would not take a cock for a swallow as far as that goes. So it's your choice. This is lighter weight and it's a little bit more smaller diameter, but it's up to you to decide where you want to get it. And eBay, I'm not an eBay guy. I just go like to these famous camera stores that deal with used stuff, and I've never been disappointed yet. So let's jump right into the pictures without further doggy-doo, shall we? So I left early in the morning and it was just about sunrise. I was able to pop these two pictures at f1.2. And then further down the street, there's the famous Eagle Tattoo place. And I got them at 1.2. And this is the meeting place. And I think I got them at f2.8. And then I got to Motown East. And I stopped down to 5.6, 8, and 11. And that was the different apertures. Now, a lot of the earlier pictures are at 5.6, and if you look closely, since I wasn't perfectly parallel or perpendicular to these storefronts, if I'm shooting at an angle, some sections are out of focus, and here's a perfect example. This traffic control light here is out of focus. I was like at f4 or 5.6, so it wasn't a fault of the lens, but I wanted to demonstrate that even if the lens is out of focus, there's out of focus from being out of focus, and there's aberrated out of focus. So, and here's another example. I wasn't perfectly parallel and perpendicular. But here I was further away, and I was more parallel and perpendicular. And look at this corner. It's dead nuts. Great depth of field. Because that's the thing with fast lenses. This is backlit, this picture. The faster your lens, the more you want to be further away from your subject. Because the further away you are, the more depth of field you got. At f1.2, everything, maybe 70 feet away should be in focus. 70 feet to infinity. But anything closer than that, and you're going to have narrow depth of field. So a lot of these pictures, when I stop down to 5.6 and f8, you can see like there's a greater depth of field. This is slightly blurry because of unintended camera motion. These flowers are just past prime, but I took a picture of them anyway, and you can see the shallow depth of field here. Here's the three terrorists. I think it's Washington, Lafayette, and Hamilton, I believe. And here's across the street. Across the street, everything's in focus. But then look at the corner detail down here. That's pretty nice. This is another slightly camera shake. This is Bella Oxnix and his dog Peaches. Although actually this is the first seeing eye dog and the guy who trained him. But I call him Bella Oxnix and Peaches. Oh, look at the buka and the bricks in the building in back of Bella Oxnix. Did you see that? How bizarre it was? Now, I'm in the same general area. Here's the same building with the same bricks, and they're in focus. And you can see what happened that I got that weird buka there. And that other picture with Bella Oxmix as compared to these bricks, where they're now nice and sharp and they look like bricks. The bottom dollar is that this is a nice lens. if you want to go vintage. And here's a perfect example. Look at their shadow detail in the back of those billboards, even though it's strongly backlit. Here's some starbursts from all those aperture blades. They make little starburst patterns. Chef Freddy's table. I bet you he's glad that that building's finally being finished off. They got all this construction equipment laying around. Eventually, that'll all be gone. This building is being knocked down, and these were the 3 billboards we've seen that were backlit before. Here's this bird. This bird was just standing there squawking at me. The Salvation Army. Well, I like their sign. Their sign has like a lot of detail in it, so I use it for, a reference. Now, if you look at this, all the corners in this picture are nice and sharp. Maybe it's down to F11. So there's this corner, there's lower right, upper left, and then here we got the lower left. All nice and sharp in focus. So, but the more you stop down the lens, the more depth of field you're going to get, without a doubt. This city is changing. There's a lot of construction going on, so I figure I would document some of the old and the new, and so historians in the future, if there is a future, if we don't obliterate ourselves with atomic destruction, then they could compare this somehow. Like, oh, what happened? Someday there's going to be buildings and this church steeple is going to get blocked. Dublin Pub. It's just a weird green building. I like it, This famous statue, plaque, commemorative heroic plaque. At least she has her armpits shaved in this picture, right? That's good. Although, how would you put that in a plaque? Hairy armpits. This is black lit. I had to bring up the shadow detail a little bit. So it's got excellent corner detail, and it's a nice lens. It's a really nice lens. If you're looking for a 50mm vintage lens, go with a 1.2, and you got the 1.2 whenever you want to do low light level work. That's all. No need to have more than one 50mm, although I have a couple of them, but that's another story. Look at that. That's amazing. And that's through a window, too. I find early morning and late afternoon you get your best texturing from shadows and slanting rays of light and everything. See, I boosted this just so you could see the detail, but that's all I did. I didn't sharpen it, I didn't try to make it look better except for a little exposure compensation. Now following is a video of that bird that we saw sitting there before. And what was that all about with this bird? These would probably make good desktop backgrounds, wouldn't they? I have to look into that. Azaleas.